So today we will start with the last part of macros, that is the macroprocessor. Fine. So we'll quickly go through the role of a macroprocessor first. So what it does is it takes an assembly language program as input, right? And the input assembly language program is supposed to contain some macro definitions and macro calls. That is why we are using the macroprocessor. Now this macroprocessor then transforms this assembly language program to an expanded source code, right? We have already seen in the previous lectures what a macro definition is, what a macro call is, and how that leads to an expanded source code, right? So we get this expanded source code by using a macroprocessor, right? That is a function of the macroprocessor to transform the assembly language program that is given as input to an expanded source code. Also, this expanded source code does not contain the macro definitions and macro calls, right? So the expanded source code is without the macro definition and macro call. Fine. Then the expanded source code is further processed by the assembler. So the macroprocessor in itself takes as input an assembly language program, fine, which contains the macro definitions and macro calls, and then it processes it by generating an expanded source code, which is further processed by the assembler itself, right? So this is the role of a macroprocessor. Now the macroprocessor has certain tasks to do. If we break down the job of a macroprocessor, we can get 4 distinct jobs, fine, and we are now going through each of these jobs. So the first task is to recognize the macro definitions, fine. So the first and primary job for a macroprocessor is to recognize the macro definitions. So the macroprocessor must identify, fine, it must identify the macro definition, starting with the macro pseudo-op and ending with the mend pseudo-op. So this is the primary task of a macroprocessor, to understand when a macro definition is starting, or where it is starting and where it is ending, right? Once it has the ability to do that, it should also correctly identify any nesting. We have already gone through nested macros in the previous sections, right? So the macroprocessor has to have the ability of understanding which one is the last macro end statement, and it has to be able to match it with the first macro statement. Obviously the last macro end statement is supposed to be ending the definition for the first macro statement, right? So the macroprocessor has to have the ability of determining where each macro is particularly starting and where it is being ended, where its definition is ending, fine. This is the first role of a macroprocessor. Okay, the second task is to save the definitions, right? So the macroprocessor must store the macro definition, which will be required further for expansion of macros. So it should not happen that a macroprocessor simply understands what the definitions are and then just forget about them. It can't do that, right? It has to save the definitions in some place in a proper format, fine, so that it can be further used during macro expansion, because we already know that the macro expansion makes use of the macro definitions. This we have already studied in the previous lecture, right? The third task of a macroprocessor is to recognize the macro calls. So the macroprocessor must recognize macro calls that appear as operation mnemonics, fine. We have already gone through macro calls in the previous lectures too, right? So right now I am not providing any further examples, because we have done ample amount of examples in the previous classes. So the macro call has to recognize the macroprocessor, has to recognize the macro calls. The macro calls are handled as a certain particular type of operation code or opcode, right? Same as a macro, same as an assembler, the macroprocessor also handles the macro calls by treating them as opcodes or operation codes, fine. So this is the third task of a macroprocessor, which is recognize the calls, where is the macro being called. And the last task is to expand the calls and substitute the arguments. So we have already seen that whenever a macro is defined and whenever it is called after that, the macro call statement leads to an expanded source code, right? And if the macro had some arguments in them, then the expanded code also had the arguments which were passed during the macro call statement, right? We have already seen these things. So it is the task of a macro processor to ensure that the processor must substitute for macro definition arguments the corresponding arguments from macro call. So we have already seen how we can use dummy arguments in macro definition, and in place of these dummy arguments we can actually pass valid arguments during macro call statement, right? So these are the 4 preliminary tasks or basic tasks of a macro processor, right? So in case of any question about the job or task of a macro processor, we are supposed to put these up. Fine. Moving ahead, we have the concept of how a macro processor is implemented. Fine. So as we can easily understand, a macro processor is nothing but again a set of instructions. Fine. But there has to be a proper algorithm or a proper idea of how that should work, same as we have seen in the case of an assembler, right? So let us begin with the implementation of a macro processor. So same as assembler, a macro processor first scans and processes lines of text. So that is its whole job. If we can summarize it in one single sentence, the assembler, just like an assembler, the macro processor also scans and processes some lines of text. Now obviously, whenever we say lines of text, we actually mean instructions. Right? Each line of text is an instruction from the source code, right? So in assembly language, these instructions are interrelated by addressing, right? So when we have studied assembler in the previous lectures, we have already seen that every instruction has some specific addresses, right? Relative address locations and absolute address locations, and one instruction can refer to the other. So an instruction can refer to another using its address or name. We have seen both of these uses, where an instruction can refer to another instruction, where an instruction can refer to another instruction by using its name or label, or even by using its address location, right? We have seen use of both in the previous lectures, right? So similar to that, we could have a scope of using addresses, but in macro processor the instructions are not closely related. Fine. Why? Because the macro definitions and macro calls is what the macro processor deals with, right? But macro definitions do not refer outside of themselves. Fine. The macro definitions do not refer outside of themselves. It is only a fixed and isolated single block of code. And the macro calls, they refer only to the macro definitions. The macro calls do not have link to any other instruction in a assembly language source program. Fine. So this is a particular speciality of the macro code, right? That the instructions are not so much closely interrelated, because the macro definitions do not have link with any other instruction outside itself, and the macro calls only have link with the macro definitions. Fine. So the macro processor makes 2 passes over the input text. So whenever we are feeding a source code as input to a macro processor, it will perform the whole job using 2 passes. In the first pass, it will try to process the macro definitions, and in the second pass, it will try to process the macro call. Fine. Very simple. So what happens is, a macro processor cannot expand the macro call unless it finds and saves the corresponding macro definition. Fine. So as we have seen in the basics of macro, that we cannot actually determine how a macro call will do unless we have the macro definition, right? We have already seen that in the previous lecture. Similarly, now a macro processor, when it has to actually work on a macro, it has to find and save the corresponding definition in the particular format which is in the macro definition table, right? We will study this next. So unless it does so, it cannot expand its macro call, right? So the first pass examines every operation code, right? So the first pass examines every operation code in the source program. Whenever it determines that we have found a macro definition, it saves the macro definition in the macro definition table, which is called the MDT. Fine. So whenever a macro definition is identified, that definition is saved in the macro definition table or the MDT. Fine. Next, what the processor does is it saves a copy of the input text on secondary storage for use in the second pass. So whatever source code is fed to the processor, first it identifies and saves the macro definition in the macro definition table. Secondly, it saves a copy of the input code on a secondary storage for the later use by the second pass. Fine. There are also other rules. For instance, the first pass also prepares the macro name table, MNT. Obviously, from the name we can understand this table is supposed to store the name of a macro. So each entry in the table corresponds to the index of the beginning of macro definition. Obviously, because every macro definition has the name at the beginning, right? So that particular index location value along with the name is stored in the macro name table. Fine. Right. So this is the more or less the operations that are performed in the first pass of macro processor, right? In the next pass, in the second pass, what we do is we examine every operation code mnemonic and we replace each macro name with text from the macro definition. So the second pass is pretty simple, right? What it does is every operation code is examined, and wherever we find a macro name, that is wherever we see a macro call statement, we actually replace that part with text that belongs to the macro definition. So this is how we have been going through each of the examples during our lectures on this module, right? So the same thing is actually done by a macro processor. Fine. So these are the steps which are undertaken in the processing of a macro code, right, of a source code containing macros. Fine. And what we have gone through is we have seen the roles of a macroprocessor, we have seen the tasks that a macroprocessor performs step by step, and also we have seen how we can actually implement, right, what is the logic behind implementation of a macroprocessor. Fine. So we will meet in the next lecture. Thank you.